My name is Austin Jackson. I am an attorney, and I have been practicing law since 2016.
And if you
So I guess that would be 4.5 years at this point.
Perfect. And if you'd like to specifically specify your
My area of practice.
Yes.
So I practice family law, personal injury, and then a little bit of bankruptcy when I have to.
And how did you first become interested in your career?
Well, I became interested in the law when I was a child, honestly. I was very argumentative, and I was that child in class a lot that would argue with the teacher respectfully. And so I had lots of teachers often tell me that I should be an attorney, and so eventually I decided I agreed with them. My aunt growing up was also an attorney, and my mother actually went to law school when I was in high school. So all of those also kind of led me further down the path, but I always kind of wanted to be an attorney since I can remember. So in order to become an attorney, you have to obtain a bachelor's degree of some sort. You can honestly get a bachelor's as long as it's an actual bachelor's in almost anything. There's not, sometimes there's a preconception that you have to do something that's specifically pre-law, and that's simply not true. I was a history major, which is a common sort of pre-law type degree. Many of my fellow law students had history degrees. Another common one was political science. I just picked history because I love history, and so it was going to be something that would keep me engaged through the bachelor's degree and be interesting to me. So I knew before I started that degree that I wanted to be an attorney, so it didn't really matter what my degree was. Some people pick different degrees because they didn't ever plan on being an attorney, and that's also helpful. For instance, people who have engineering degrees, they can often kind of parlay that knowledge and experience into becoming better patent attorneys. So, putting patents on technology and inventions and things of that nature. So I didn't have that, but I actually thought I wanted to be a constitutional lawyer, and so the history definitely made sense with that. Turns out there are not a ton of jobs in constitutional law, and the ones that there are do not pay very well. So I have moderated my expectations and went a different direction. But I went to law school at the University of Denver. I did take a year off in between my bachelor's degree and law school, actually because I finished the bachelor's degree quicker than I meant to. So I had not applied to law school yet, so I had to wait a year. And so I interned actually with my mother, who was an attorney. So that was my experience, I guess, leading up to becoming an attorney. Well, I think you have to be able to speak clearly. Ability in conversing is definitely a key thing. So somewhat extroverted, hopefully very extroverted. There are types of attorneys where you don't have to engage much with clients, but for the most part, if you're a lawyer, then you have clients, and so you're going to have to be able to talk to people. So that's a big personality trait. Obviously, being able to think critically. I don't know if that's a personality trait or not, but critical thinking skills are important because you have to analyze, whether it's case facts or interpret the law or whatever the case may be, so to speak. Those are both important things, but just, kind of being able to speak in public also is a big thing, right? So, again, if you're writing wills and trusts or analyzing contracts and never going to court, you don't have to be a public speaker. There are definitely jobs in the legal field where you don't have to do that, but most of the time you're going to end up doing some kind of speaking in front of someone at some point. So it depends on what sector you get into. That's kind of what I was alluding to with the constitutional law thing. Most of that sort of a job is either going to be in the nonprofit sector or in the maybe public sector. And so those jobs are going to be, starting at least in Colorado. And when I started, they were, in the $50,000 to $60,000 a year range. If you get into big corporate giant firms in Denver, you could be making, 130 or more thousands of dollars per year right out of law school. Those are obviously highly sought after and also require, extensive hours per week and, per month. And you definitely sacrifice your personal life to be able to sustain a job like that. So ideally, so the answer is it depends, which is definitely a lawyer answer. So I work in a smaller firm, so I'm somewhere in between what a public sector person would be dealing with and one of those giant firms in Denver that I was referring to, right? We have 3 attorneys, 2 paralegals, and then a front desk receptionist. So, and we also have an office manager who handles the billing, dealing with payments with clients and things of that nature. So our atmosphere is pretty laid back as far as on a day-to-day basis. We all know each other very well. We have to get along because it's not very easy to avoid each other in such a small office. But I like to think that we like each other. The support personnel, like the paralegals and the receptionist, they usually work between 40 and 45 hours a week at the most, usually really 40 hours a week. And the attorneys, we can work anywhere from, we could work 40 hours in a week, or I might work as many as 60 hours in a week. It just kind of depends on what my caseload is like at that time, if I have a bunch of cases going to hearing soon, if there are a bunch of deadlines that I'm trying to meet. Could be even more than 60 hours, but I would say on average somewhere between, probably about 50 is probably the average between those. If I walk in the morning, I usually check my email and, look at my calendar, remind myself what I have to do that day if I need to remind myself. If it's a day that I'm going to have a hearing, I'm pretty, I've been thinking about it for days or weeks ahead of time, so I don't really have to check my calendar for that. But check in on that, see if anything was added to my calendar, respond to some of those emails. I like in the morning to get a lot of my desk work done if I can, because it's quieter. Less phone calls coming in, so it's maybe some drafting of, if it's a motion that I need to draft or an agreement or whatever it might be. Do that. Usually I have a consultation or two to take care of in the morning, so someone who's wanting to find out whether they want to hire my firm to represent them, and go on from there. If I have a hearing that afternoon, I would probably be spending the morning preparing for that hearing, doing final preparation ideally, running through the questions that I prepared for my client, as well as the cross-examination questions I have for the other party, making sure that all of my exhibits are in order and prepared. And then I usually work through lunch, which is where I come up with that 50-hour an hour, average kind of thing. Not because my employer makes me by any means, but I just kind of would rather leave earlier than take an hour off at lunch. So I just, it's more efficient for me to do that. Then, the afternoon looks about the same, vice versa with the hearing thing. It could be in the morning, could be in the afternoon, and just take care of all of those sorts of things. I'm constantly sending out emails and responding to phone calls and drafting things. That's kind of what all of the time looks like. So the benefits are definitely that it is challenging. It's stimulating work. It's not, there are not many dull days in my job. Sometimes that also becomes a detraction on my job, which is, especially with the family law, there's a lot of emotional, activity going on, we'll call it. And so it's hard to not get wrapped up with what your clients are going through and to not take it personally when things don't go their way. And so it's very stressful in that sense, because you're dealing with people's lives and divorces and child custody and all of that kind of very heavy stuff. But the benefit is also when you're able to push through that and get the results that your clients want, that's a really good feeling, because you've achieved something that they couldn't have done on their own, and you help somebody really improve their situation, which is, what every lawyer wants to do, I would hope. Really just provide a lending hand, and in an area that's really scary to someone who's not necessarily versed in the law and, aware of what their rights might be. So those are kind of both the benefits and the challenges. It can be very stressful, but it's also very rewarding. Yes, I have 3 children and a wife, so I hope it's compatible. It seems to be so far. I think my wife still likes me. My children seem to. I have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 2-month-old. So it's definitely tough at times. We talked about how sometimes I'm working 60 hours a week, and so it's tough to make sure that I'm available to pick them up from daycare sometimes, or to be able to take them to extracurricular activities. But I think that doesn't apply any more to me than it does to any other real adult job. We all have to work at some point, and it's just a matter of finding your balance and finding the ability to be flexible where you need to be. And so it seems like it works, yes. And I don't find myself, if I'm able to put in the hours that I need to during the week, I don't end up here in the office on the weekends very often, put it that way. I would definitely say just, when I can really help people, that winning someone child custody or something when they have been deprived of that, or in the personal injury world, really setting someone up financially to do better when they've suffered a serious injury and they're having a hard time, to be able to pay off their bills and to have some money to have a cushion while they still continue to recover. That's a really rewarding feeling, I think, because you're really just helping somebody, and that's nice. I guess that's the best part of the job. I guess the biggest changes that I see on the horizon are probably more procedural and administrative than necessarily substantive. And what I mean by that is, especially this last year, not to speak of COVID, but we've had to adapt our legal system significantly because of the lack of in-person hearings. And so we've had to utilize WebEx, which is similar to Zoom, and conducted a lot of hearings out of my office that I would, normally have been in front of a judge and, in the flesh. And so that's been nice from the perspective that I don't have to trudge down to the courthouse and make sure that I remember all of my evidence and my books and all of that good stuff. But it's also been, it's had a negative effect in that there's something to being in person and being in front of a judge and reading full body language when you're cross-examining a witness on the stand. And so that's been kind of a challenge this year, and that's something that I think is going to continue to evolve as we go forward. Ideally, we're going to return mostly to in-person, but I think that we're going to retain some amount of kind of remote sort of video hearings for a long time, if not forever. I think that's a big change. And then there's also just the technological advances that are being made across the board with artificial intelligence and things of that nature. And so as jobs kind of disappear, I wonder when they're going to figure out how to replace an attorney, with those sorts of things. We as attorneys like to think that we have this extremely difficult, requiring of a lot of critical thinking job, which I think we do. But how long until a robot can do the same thing that I do? I don't know. So those are the changes on my mind, I guess. Kind of the same advice I would give anybody who's pursuing any degree. If you get what you put into it, and so if you work hard and you push yourself and you get the most out of your education and out of your experiences, then you're going to be that much better at whatever you do. And so I don't think that applies only to law, obviously, but I think it's especially true in the law, in that if you're not, really giving it your all and putting forth your best effort, you're not going to catch everything that you could catch, and you're going to be unprepared, and you're going to be struggling. And so it's important not to procrastinate, which a lot of attorneys do, including myself. I think that we make it much harder on ourselves in not only career progression, but also just day-to-day sort of operations because we procrastinate. And so I think the biggest thing is don't procrastinate, I guess would be the best advice. I guess what I wish I would have known before I began was just kind of the true nature of the legal field, in the sense that, you know, kind of what we talked about earlier, how I originally wanted to be a constitutional lawyer. I don't think I pieced together exactly what that looked like financially, with 3 kids, for instance. Is that doable? Is working in the nonprofit sector going to be enough for me to be able to support those children and my wife? My wife works full time, so I'm not supporting her. She does her own work, but you know, what is the true implication of what you're doing? Because everyone tells you, you know, follow your dreams and you can do anything you want. And, you know, to a certain extent that's true. And I certainly don't want to diminish that, but you do need to keep in mind the reality of the situation. And it's like, okay, I'm going to have to budget at some point. I'm going to have to pay my bills on a monthly basis. And so does my dream pay for those bills, or am I going to do my dream on the weekends and pay for my dream with my job that I do during the week? That's something that I guess I wish I had thought more about, or had been, I guess, more advised on in the past. You know, but I think I'd still end up where I am today, with or without that advice. But I think I would have gotten here differently. So,
Thank you.